So Pekka Kuusisto is here with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra this week, and we're really excited to have you. And this is your first official week as artistic partner, is that right?
Exactly.
Yes, and we are very excited.
So am I.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your childhood growing up. Your brothers are both violinists, I understand?
I have one brother.
One brother.
But yeah,
Okay.
he plays violin for two people. No, he's the only brother. I've got two sisters.
Oh, maybe that's why.
Yeah, I've got two older sisters. My dad's been married twice. So from his first marriage, I have two older sisters who are dancers, but their partners are musicians. So even they didn't get very far.
So when did you start playing the violin?
I was 3.
3 years old. And did your brother also start at the same young age?
I think he was 4.
So
he's about
older.
two years and 9 months older than I am. So I observed his practicing for a while when I was 2, 3, and then. So my parents gave me a violin too.
Yeah. So did you have a lot of influence of different kinds of music when you were a child?
Yeah, we did. Dad used to study in this country. He came here in the 50s. His family are all musicians from way back, and I don't think he was planning on becoming one himself. So he was going to become a sailor or something, but his dad, my grandfather, persuaded my father to study organ playing or something. Apparently he had a visible talent for playing the keyboard. So my dad studied organ for a while in Finland, and then he got the opportunity to come to New York to study at a school for religious music or something. And then he found jazz while he was in New York, and I think that kind of put him on a path to actually becoming a musician and letting the sailing become the hobby and not vice versa. And so he's done all kinds of stuff. He did a lot of electronic music, experimental music, a lot of jazz, of course a lot of religious music. He's composed all kinds of stuff himself. He has, I think, the Finnish record in writing operas.
Oh, really?
And
wow.
Yeah. So when we were tiny with my brother, our father would play us all kinds of music, either on the piano or then from recordings. And we started improvising on some kind of a jazz language when we were 4 or 5.
Wow.
And trying to figure out how the bass lines work in a Satin Doll by Duke Ellington.
Right.
Which kind of harmonies you can do and which kind of melodies you can play in your solo that will work with the bass line and the harmonies.
Wow.
I think that was super useful.
Yeah, I can see that in your work with us. I can see that you really hear things from the harmony perspective. From the
especially with the kind of, we're playing classical repertoire, the Haydn this week, and most of the other stuff too. Maybe the Kreisler concerto is the one where you just kind of listen to the sound.
Yeah.
not so much the foundation.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about this program that we're doing specifically this week. So all the pieces kind of look backwards, right?
Kind of. Yeah, the Haydn in a special way, because there's the clock. In a way, it feels almost like the Haydn looks forward.
That's
like
true.
The clock movement feels like he's already making a joke of people who, I need to be somewhere.
He was way ahead of his time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have the most beautiful melody in the violins, but the tick-tock of the mechanism is forcing us to play it a bit quicker than what we would instinctively do.
Yeah.
Because we're late.
Right, we're always late. So I feel like each of the composers kind of looks back a little bit differently. Like there was Spigi, goes way back, right, to the ancient eras. And then the Prokofiev.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how they function differently in their looking back?
I can try. Well, the Prokofiev and the Haydn are a fun match to have kind of at the ends of the program. We start with the Haydn, we end with the Prokofiev. The Prokofiev, he's making You know, there's this, if you go on the internet, you can find YouTube recordings or video recordings of it's kind of shocking, one of these days it's not going to be called video anymore, it's just going to be called YouTube.
It's true.
Like moving pictures, it's not going to be called cinema, it'll just be called YouTube. But there are videos of Dudley Moore, the amazing Dudley Moore, doing parodies of a Beethoven piano sonata,
right,
or a Schubert song, or there's one fantastic one where he simultaneously makes a parody of Benjamin Britten's composition and Benjamin Britten's piano playing and the voice of Peter Pears. So he does kind of like a fake Benjamin Britten song, an arrangement of a folk song, and then he imitates all the people involved.
Wow.
But he does it in a way that is just it's packed with real knowledge and vision about how these artists were significant or are significant and great. The Beethoven sonata parody is based on, and he spins this incredible keyboard fantasy out of completely in the style of Beethoven. And I think this used to be on a show called Beyond the Fringe on British TV, and this was like prime time television comedy. At a time in the world where making a parody of Schubert was considered acceptable material for primetime television.
And understood by the masses.
Exactly.
Amazing, yeah.
This is what Prokofiev is doing. He's making a parody of a Haydn symphony in a way where you have to know Haydn's language to appreciate all the genius bits of what Prokofiev is doing with it. And it's a masterpiece. I think he manages to kind of make a perfect marriage between the Haydn overcoat and the Haydn kind of skeleton of the piece, the structure, and planting up kind of the most obvious Mannheim rocket in the first measures of the piece. It's just like everything is there that you need to have, but then there's this kind of extra layer of sort of Russian pain that emerges every now and then, where you know who the real composer is.
Right. Could you explain to some people who might not know what the Mannheim, what that refers to? Could you just explain what that is?
Oh, I would recommend that you just look it up on the internet. The Mannheim School of Composition developed a lot of devices, compositional devices, including the rocket, the rapidly ascending major chord that would function back then as a. It was kind of this, I suppose it would have been the same thing as if you go to a rock show and then somebody flicks on the strobe lighting that goes like, and everyone goes, yeah! Everyone goes crazy. That it would have had sort of the same effect on a concert audience back then.
Right.
And Prokofiev, for sort of 200 years or 150 years later, he just puts it right at the front of everything in the beginning of the piece. Yeah. And the amount of excitement and fun never kind of goes down after that. So it's amazing.
One of the things I thought was interesting this week was when we started the Kreisler, you said that when it was first performed back in the 1920s, the audience probably would not have realized that it was not Vivaldi because it says Vivaldi. Exactly. And so and nowadays, of course, most people could probably tell. Could you explain that a little bit? Like, what is it that shows that it's not Vivaldi? I mean, you and I know.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed was the funny odd pizzicato in the last movement.
Yeah, well, that's a very clear joke. Yeah, but I think it's just. I mean, the language sounds like it's late 1800s, kind of. Sort of entertainment music to be played. It's almost like in the background of the party.
Right.
I don't think, like, it doesn't have the. I'm trying to find the right word, but when you play Vivaldi, there's this. You feel like you are in a very clear form.
Right.
And when Vivaldi sort of breaks the form, it's extremely obvious, and you kind of really feel like the earth is moving somehow. The structure of the pieces is always very kind of secure, and he's always relying on a certain way of moving the harmonies, moving the bass lines, using the and he has this sort of certain types of sequences that I think anybody would recognize to be Vivaldi. Vivaldi always stops in time before he doesn't do like the fourth one or the fifth one. Kreisler does.
He keeps going.
Yeah, he just keeps sort of pouring on the honey.
Yes.
But I think even that, the opening melody of the solo violin in the and it's just a completely different age of music.
Right.
It's kind of like the Albinoni Adagio, which sort of feels like it can't be from back then, because it probably isn't.
It probably isn't, yeah.
If I've understood right, Vivaldi was not a very well-known composer in the 1920s. I might be completely wrong, but it makes it much more. It's like there has been so much incredibly valuable research about into older music in the last, I don't know, 50 years or so, 50, 60 years or so.
Yeah.
And a lot of composers from the Baroque era who were probably relatively unknown in the first part of the 1900s have been sort of woken up and have become a part of the standard repertoire, especially for Baroque style ensembles. And it has given vitamins to like the whole classical music performing society of the planet.
Yeah.
So we are more aware of this part of the history. And I think in the 1920s, the situation was probably completely different.
Very different.
And Kreisler was able to, he wrote all kinds of stuff that he put other people's names on.
Right.
We have something in the style of Pugnani that everyone plays when they're like 8.
Right.
And I think when he played it, it was actually officially by Pugnani himself.
Right.
And he did this all the time. And then people would sort of discover that it wasn't by this ancient person but by Kreisler himself, and apparently often the people who had been praising the piece started saying awful things about it when it became obvious that it wasn't old.
Right.
And Kreisler, I think he had, if I've understood correctly, he had enough of a sort of positive kind of self-esteem that he just laughed.
Didn't bother
about
him.
it.
Yeah,
he said that the names change, but the quality of the music remains the same.
Right.
And I think it's like, I feel like we're on a sort of role-playing game trip when we play this Kreisler, because it's a style of playing that is not what I do in my everyday life. And it's a style of playing. Maybe if you would do research into what kind of mainstream violin playing has gone through in the 1900s, some parts of the kind of very muscular and very heroic violin language that sort of has, in some parts of the world at least, become like the standard sound of a violin. I think Kreisler might have started some of I don't think he intended to. I personally think that he probably wouldn't enjoy modern day violin playing so much, because we are so strong and kind of powerful so much of the time, and he was just speaking through the instrument.
He was sort of simple, and it was very lyrical, and
words and sentences.
Yeah. Well, this week you kept talking about, when you play with a certain bravura, then the violin has to be up here, right?
Yeah, that was mostly a joke.
Maestoso is here, so Kreisler would be maybe down here, just relaxed. And
he looks fantastic when he plays.
Yes. Yeah.
The match of the hair and the mustache and the suit and the violin, it's perfect. Sometimes you see pictures of Kreisler with his walking his German Shepherd dog and just looking like the happiest person on the planet.
Right.
I think also he was one of these fiddle players who didn't worry so much about playing scales and arpeggios every day to maintain a certain kind of physical shape to play the instrument. He probably didn't have to. or his priorities were somewhere else. It's like a painter who kind of works out to build muscle strength every day. It will probably make the painting a bit more stiff. He didn't want to do that.
He didn't do that.
Although it has to be said, apparently Kreisler had a cellist brother called Hugo, and there's an anecdote of a conversation between Hugo and Fritz before a concert that they were supposed to play together. Hugo never practiced, so he was incredibly scared before all the concerts, because he, at some point in the afternoon, he would always realize that he's actually not going to be able to play the pieces.
Wow.
And apparently this was like a recurring thing. He would always kind of, oh God, this is going to be horrible. And Fritz one time asked him, Hugo, why do you ruin your life like this? Why don't you practice so you don't have to kind of contemplate killing yourself before every concert? And Hugo said, Fritz, I would rather ruin my life for these few select hours before each concert, rather than ruin my entire life by practicing cello playing.
Oh no!
It's one approach.
That is one approach, yeah.
But it gives playing the Kreisler concerto, I suppose, gives us a kind of time window or an opportunity to look into a time of violin playing and music making that is lost.
And very unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can't really go. You know, it's been an exciting time back then when, a kind of like important moment. I've spoken about this before, but can you imagine what playing something like the Mendelssohn concerto was like before recordings were sort of globally spread and people knew exactly how Kreisler or Oistrach or Heifetz or these guys, how they would play the Mendelssohn concerto, when you would just be at home and you would just have the music and you never heard any famous person play it before.
Yeah. Very different.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been in so many ways so much more interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody would go to music school and try to sound like Heifetz.
Right, and there would probably be a lot more variety to the sounds that we get. Well, I think you bring a huge amount of variety to sound.
Yeah, it's based on ignorance.
Ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
Well, it has been wonderful working with you this week. And
Thank you.
Really looking forward to the concerts. And I just want to say welcome to the family.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.